we probably should take a few moments and let everyone repent of all they consumed, all they ate during the holidays. But it was wonderful. God has blessed us in so many ways, and we're very grateful for that. And I want to talk to you today about sharing abundantly what we have with others, and telling them about the story that we've been singing about this morning, and letting them know how much God wants to bless them, how much He wants to have them with Him in eternity, and all that He has done to make that possible. Last week, Brother Bill did us a great favor and talked to us about the joy and the peace that we have in Jesus, because that's what we've been singing about, studying about, what we believe His birth represented when He came into this world, and that's what everybody's thinking about right now. And I thought Bill's lesson was excellent, that it was just the best. And today, as I think about that peace that we have with God because of Jesus and His sacrifice, that we were enemies and now we're friends of God and we're children of God. It's such a blessing, such a joy to know that we're loved that much. And that leads us to the topic for today. I want to talk about that love of God. As we look at the scriptures, we can just see so many times how the Lord manifested His love for us and His desire to have us as His children, and to not condemn us, not to punish us, but to bless us in every possible manner. And so we're grateful for that. But then also we see that through the text that we read, the Bible, and all of the verses that we use, that we see the power of God. We don't see Him moving mountains and healing every disease instantaneously, or giving sight to the blind during the time that Jesus was here on earth. But oh, what He still does for us. What a blessing He is to every one of us. And what a joy it is to be a Christian. Now, we have all that. Now, what are we going to do with it? And I thought, it'd be so horrible if the world didn't have an opportunity to benefit from the peace that we have with God now, if they didn't have the love that Jesus has offered to us, if they couldn't actually experience it, or if they never had an opportunity to read the scriptures and see the power of God as He reveals Himself to us and helps us to understand His will for us. And so I wanted today to talk about the abundant sharing that we need to be involved in. And it's something that God has laid out very clear for us. 2 weeks ago, we studied about the Samaritan woman that Jesus encountered when He came to a well near where Jacob's well was. And He asked her for water, and she was hesitant to give it to Him, but challenged Him. How can you, being a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, to give you something to drink? And her attitude, as you see in the beginning of their conversation, wasn't always very sweet. It wasn't very nice. And Jesus eventually told her that if she would ask Him for water, He would give her living water, and she would become a spring of eternal water. She would be a spring of spiritual water, not physical water like you draw out of the well, but a means by which you can quench your thirst that you have for spiritual things and the knowledge of God and the experience of knowing God. All of that would be possible if she would just ask Him. And when you read about what He told her, you have to ask, what kind of a spring is she going to be? And I think about artesian springs. If you've ever seen one of those, water just gushing up out of the ground constantly by itself because of subterranean pressures, and just flows and flows and never finishes. We used to buy water in big jugs in Venezuela. My wife insisted on it so we would have pure water. And And then one day as I was driving the boys home from school, I noticed out there where there was a kind of a natural flow out of the mountain, and they put a pipe in there, and it was just pouring out. The guy that was selling us the water was filling up the jugs again. So there are places where you can just get water gushing up and use it for your quenching of your thirst anytime, anywhere, and it's a blessing. Well, he says, I'm going to make you a spring. You are going to be a spring of water that will be spiritual and that will satisfy many people's thirst. And then we know that as they continued on, she discovered that he really was a prophet, that he really was the Messiah. We studied that 2 weeks ago. I won't repeat the sermon, but it was a blessing for him to make her a spring of eternal knowledge, truth, and salvation. Because she then went and told everybody in her community, I just talked to this guy who told me everything about my life, and he just revealed so many things to me. I think he is not just a prophet. I think he may be the Messiah, the Son of God. Would you come and look? And Jesus stayed there for 2 days preaching, and many Samaritans became believers in Jesus and disciples. Now, the Samaritans disliked the Jews. The Jews despised the Samaritans. But Jesus showed his love not just for this woman, but by making her a spring of eternal life to all the friends that she had in that community and the neighbors that she had, and letting her tell them about Jesus. He blessed her in a special way that you would never expect a Jew to do for and to someone who was a Samaritan. They looked upon the Samaritans as being the outcasts of the world, just dogs. They didn't think that they had any value much. But Jesus showed his love for this woman and his love for her neighbors, the community, and his willingness to reach out and bless them. And then when Jesus healed 10 lepers, and you can read about this in Luke chapter 17, only one came back to say thank you. Thank you for cleansing. That was a horrible disease. It just caused your body to decay and just to waste away and slough off members, and it was just terrible. And you couldn't be with your family. You had to walk around saying, I'm unclean, and hanging around with just lepers. And so 10 lepers show up, and they want to be cleansed, and Jesus does clean them. He says, go tell the priest now that you've been cleansed, and let him see your skin, and you'll know that you're healed. And they took off to do that. But one of them came back, and he said, I'm very grateful for what you've done. Thank you for cleansing us. Thank you for cleansing me. 9 did not. And what did Jesus ask? He said, where are the 9? Come on in, guys. Glad you made it. And so, they were ungrateful, but this one man was grateful. And Jesus just had to mention, and by the way, he was a Samaritan. What do you mean? He's one of those rejects that you guys don't like. The Jews, have turned their back on. And elevated once again someone that was despised by the Jewish nation. But what is that? What does that manifest? That manifests a love, a special care for people that were not loved, the unloved ones, the unlovables, you might call them. But then again, as you go to chapter 10 of the same Luke, and he was a physician, so you see why he would be interested in these things like leprosy, but he's also interested in people that need to go to the ER, as this man who was beaten up on his way from Jerusalem to Jericho and was left to die on the side of the road, and a Pharisee passed by, did nothing for him. And a priest came by later, looked at him, and didn't help. And then a Samaritan, says Jesus, came by and helped. So Jesus was teaching his disciples and others that were listening to him the fact that we need to love all people. And we need to love not just your Jewish neighbors and Jews that are sick or Jews that have been injured. We need to be willing to help people that are Samaritans. His love reached out as far as the Samaritans, and for the Jews, that was a big difference. And the love of Jesus was one of the reasons he came to this world, was to show us what love is really all about, and to let us know that we're loved and that he cares for us. But not everybody grabs that. If you go over to Luke chapter 9, you find a different situation. Jesus is going through a certain community in Samaria where the Samaritans live. And as he's going through, they reject him because his face is as though he would go to Jerusalem, the text says. Oh, you're going up to Jerusalem. You're going there where all your other Jews are. And so the Samaritans didn't necessarily like the Jews either. And so James and John, two of Jesus's disciples, had a possible solution to this problem. Why don't we just pray and call down fire from heaven and burn up all of the Samaritans that are here in their city? Just kill them all, burn them up. And what did Jesus do? He told them, no, you don't know who we are. You don't know what we're about. That's not what we do. That's not the spirit that we have. And that's not the attitude you should manifest. What did he do? He taught them about love. He showed them about love. And he even corrected them when they failed to love the way they should. Well, Jews and Samaritans. Well, what about the Gentiles? See, Samaritans were also descendants of Abraham, but they had intermarried with the Gentiles and become a mixed breed, we would say, if we wanted to be ugly and get racial. And so they weren't appreciated by the people who were pure Jews, the descendants of Abraham without doubt. But the Gentiles could not even say what the Samaritans would say. Well, we're also descendants of Abraham, well, the Gentiles were not. And so in Luke 7, when we find that Jesus is solicited by a centurion who is a Roman Gentile leader to heal one of his servants that was sick to the point of dying. When that proposition was placed before Jesus, he gladly did it. And they told him something about this man, that he had helped the Jews to build their synagogue in his community and things like that. But he was a Gentile. He was not even a Samaritan. And the Jews would have hated him because he is a part of the invading force that came and took away their lands, took away their houses, made them pay taxes. The Roman Empire was ruling the world at that time and definitely ruling Judea. And so they had reasons not to want to do any favors for any of the soldiers. But Jesus healed the servant. As he heard the testimony that he was a good man, he feared God and things of that nature, he decided, yes, I don't care if he is a Gentile, I'm going to help him. What did the disciples see at this time? I mean, you have to understand the church has not been established yet. This is just Jesus in his ministry going through the Jewish world. And they have to understand that Jesus is being really wonderful to this centurion who is a soldier over 100 other soldiers. He's a military leader. And these are the people that have stolen our houses, our homes, our food, everything that we have, anything of value. They've ripped us off. And yet he showed his love for that person. You know, Jesus told us in Matthew 5:44 that we're to love our enemies. And he does that. We'll see that in a moment. But that was an example of how he treated not just Samaritans, but just Gentiles. And you know, after the church finally got started, we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we move on deeper into the lesson. But as the church got established and began to grow and prosper, Jews were converting a lot of Jews, but they weren't converting any Gentiles. And the beginning of the whole thing is in Acts 2, which we'll read a few verses of in a few moments. But it all started with Jews and it stayed within the camp of the Jews. They didn't reach out to the Gentile world. And so finally, God had to tell Peter and give him a vision to let him know that you've got to go and convert some Gentiles. And so he sent him to the household of Cornelius, who was a man who already believed in God and feared God, with his whole family. And so Peter goes up to Joppa, meets in the home of this man, which is something the Jews would not do. They wouldn't go into the home of a Gentile. They might get all filthy spiritually by going into a home of a Gentile. And so there was reluctance on the part of Peter. But God told him, no, you need to go up there and you need to do this. And but they're unclean and they're not nice. Well, forget it. You need to go and work with Cornelius and his family. And he did. And when he got there, this family received him with so much joy. There was so much happiness. That's what we've been talking about during Christmas. Joy, happiness, love. And that's the kind of experience that Peter had when he went up as one of the chief apostles of the city of Jerusalem to go into the home, into the house of a Gentile family and tell them about Jesus. They treated him as though Caesar himself had walked into their door. They loved him and they respected him and they heard him, and then they obeyed the gospel. Well, when Peter goes back to Jerusalem and the word has already gotten there, chapter 11 of Acts, that he baptized a Gentile family, there was great discern for that people began to think about what that meant. And, oh, that's horrible. He went into the home of Gentiles. He ate with Gentiles. Oh, worse than that, he baptized some Gentiles. Does he not know that God doesn't love Gentiles? And so they were upset. But Peter explained to them the vision he had and all that took place, everything that was said. And then they finally called on and rejoiced that the gospel was being received by Gentiles as well. But not all Jews even were acceptable to the Jewish community. When Jesus was once in a house having a meal with friends, invited by Pharisee, one of the religious leaders, to be there in his home and to eat, a woman came in that had not received, I'm sure, a card requesting that she RSVP if she was coming to the party or not. Why? Well, it says she was a sinful woman. And most commentators believe that the terminology would probably indicate that she was a prostitute. Well, what did she do? She just goes over to Jesus like she knew who he was. And she's crying all of a sudden. And she pours tears. You say, pour? Well, she cried and tears came from her eyes. But she also, and this was common among Jewish women, had flasks where they would try to capture every tear when they were sad and save it. And it became a very special little ointment for them to have their tears in the jar. And I suspect that maybe she might have brought her flask and poured it out as well. But she wept over Jesus' feet and let his feet be moistened by her tears and then wiped them off with her hair. This is a woman who did things that were not quite like that with other strange men as a part of her lifestyle. And you follow. And you see the Son of God allowing a woman who's had a lot of men's feet, wiping Jesus's feet with her hair. And they were very, very upset. Well, Jesus takes the guy who invited him to the party and just takes him apart and says, you know, when I came in here, you didn't kiss me. You didn't wash my feet. You didn't put any perfume on me. You didn't treat me like a special guest. This lady, since I got here, has not stopped kissing my feet. and she's anointing me. You need to be ashamed of yourself, basically, is what he's saying. And so this woman saw the love of God in the person of Jesus. And that's the reason Jesus had come, with to show love. And then in Matthew 5:44, when they're finally getting around to beating him up, whipping him with the cat o' nine tails, and ripping his back all to pieces, and when he was bleeding, then they nail him to a cross and hanging there, waiting to die. Jesus asked the Father to forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. These guys have no idea the sin they're committing. And please, Father, forgive them. These words were heard by some of the apostles of Jesus even. And if they hadn't quite captured the idea that Jesus believes in love and wants us to practice love, it became obvious. I mean, even in the church, the teaching that Jesus did, that is that what in John 13:34 and 35, is that we are not just to love our enemies, we're to love everybody. And by this, we're to love each other. And by this, the world will know that we are the true disciples of Jesus Christ, by the love that we have for one another. People that visit our congregation for the first time, never been here before, may never come back, who knows, but judge us, will judge us first and foremost by our love. And they'll probably do it not because they expect everybody there to love them, since they're not known, they're not introduced yet, but they're probably looking at how we treat each other and how much love we have for one another. So Jesus came to bring peace to the world, but you can't have peace without love. He came to bring joy to the world, but you can't have joy if you don't have love. When you're unloved, or even, and I know every one of you have experienced this, I have, when you feel unloved at some point in life, nobody loves you, you feel horrible. And you can't have joy. You can't have peace without love. And Jesus taught them about love, showed them how to extend your love to others that are in need, and then how to forgive when you're mistreated. In Luke 19, verse 10, but the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Why did Jesus come to this world? Not just to heal the lepers, not just to rebuke the Pharisees. He came to reach out to everyone and to seek and to save every last one of us. Is that possible? No. Why? Because a lot of us don't want to go to heaven, I guess, when we die, because we're not willing to listen to Jesus or let him teach us. And then in Mark 16, 15 and 16, Great Commission, go into all the world and preach the gospel to how many people? All creation. Well, Lord, you have to understand there are some people that are Pharisees. There's some people that are Sadducees. There are some people that are not Jewish. They're Gentiles, or they're Samaritans, or they're one of those unclean people. He said, preach the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. Jesus didn't say, go and preach to a special group. He said, go and preach to everybody. And that's what we have to do. 1 Corinthians 9:19, as you heard the longer text read, we find that the Apostle Paul understood that we are to reach out to everyone and try and win everyone. And he says, though I am free, I belong to no one. I have made myself a slave to everyone, to everybody, to win as many as possible, irrespective of their race, irrespective of their position in life, irrespective of the sins they've committed, irrespective of their genealogy. None of that. Everybody, give everybody a chance. And then when he was talking in his ministry to his disciples about how they were to reach out to the community and how they were to reach out to the masses, he says, then as an illustration, He talks about a guy who invited everybody to his house for a big dinner, and he's called the master here. He is the one that is the owner of the house. He wanted to have a party. He was a political leader probably, and it says master. Then the master told his servants, what happened? Nobody came to his party. So he told his servants, go out on the road and the country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house may be full. In other words, if my best friends and the people that all love me and all want to come here and be a part of this, if they're not willing to come, just go invite anybody. I want my house full of people. And I think about, how we could be selected and who we teach and to whom we preach. We need to be careful and know that God is anxious for everybody to come to the party. And so we have Christmas. Some of us had a ton of people in our homes. Some maybe were alone. Everybody had his own situation, but one thing that we need to know, whether we are poor, rich, whether we have a horrible record of being criminal in our conduct, or whatever may be our situation, we're invited to the party. You don't have to RSVP. You're welcome. And if you come and you don't have the right kind of garment, or you don't have the right attitude, or you don't have the vocabulary that's expected, you don't know how to act at a party, you're welcome by Jesus because he loves us. In Acts chapter 2, verse 41 and 42, we see the church was established. Now we're talking about not just the ministry of Jesus, now we're talking about the actual establishment of his kingdom, about which he's been talking. All of the teaching about joy and peace and love and everything else all comes to bear on this particular incident when the church is established. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And so a multitude of people became Christians the first day. Well, they'd been prepared by Jesus. They'd been able to hear Jesus speak and teach, and they saw how he treated people. And they knew that the gospel was for all to a certain extent, but they still weren't on track fully. In chapter 2, verse 46 and 47, the end of that chapter, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. He came to seek and to save that which was lost, and daily he was saving people. Daily he was meeting their needs. Daily through the church, he was able to convert lives and bring happiness where there'd been unhappiness. That's what Jesus did. But still, you remember, that was initially only among the Jewish people. But they learned the love of Jesus, as he had mentioned in the Great Commission, is for every creature, every human being on the face of the earth that can understand. Kelly and I read these passages in the New Testament, and we understood that it was our responsibility to reach out to everybody everywhere. And I had not planned on being a missionary. I remember sitting in my office and reading an ad in a Brotherhood publication about a need for a missionary on a little island in the Caribbean called St. Vincent. And I'd read that article before. I'd seen that ad before, over and over again. Nobody gone. And I thought, what's wrong with our Brotherhood? My feet were up on my desk. And I'm reading, and I was wondering, why hasn't somebody done something about that situation? There's an open door. And I knew other people that had gone into the Caribbean that it was a wide open field, that so many people wanted to study the Bible. And I couldn't believe that nobody had done anything about it until all of a sudden it occurred to me They're probably doing just what I'm doing. So I called Brother Kelly in Chattanooga and said, I think I'm the man you're looking for. That ad in the paper, I think I'm the one you're looking for. He said, and he was the head of the post office department in Chattanooga. He said, I know you're the man. I said, you don't know me at all. He said, yeah, I do. You're somebody that has seen the need and you want to do it, you're willing to do it, and you're volunteering. And he said, that is exactly what we need for this particular task. It's not an easy life in the Caribbean. You're not going to a hotel and spend time on the beach. You're going to be working with all kinds of very, very poor people. And you're going to be in very difficult situations, sometimes dangerous. And so it takes somebody who will just call up and say, I think I'm the man for the job. He said, do you realize you haven't asked me how much we're paid? You haven't asked me how many furloughs you get. You haven't asked me anything about the benefits from this employment. And he said, I want you to come to Chattanooga and then we're going to the Caribbean. And he took it down. And that was 100 years ago. Actually, it wasn't quite that long back. It was in 69 that I went down. Actually, it was in 68 that I made the survey trip. And we decided to go into Latin America and see what we could do. And this is not the boats. This is not the, Kelly often says, you need to tell the church what we're doing in Latin America through the Highland Branch Church and other congregations incorporating us as well. This is the time to do it because I want everybody to know that we have a responsibility to go into the world and to preach the gospel to every creature, everywhere, under all circumstances. And so Latin American mission base is what I call it. Why? Because that across it gives you the word lamb, L-A-M-B. And you've heard of people talking about lamb here. Well, that's what that is. Latin American mission base, evangelizing Latin America. Well, in Trinidad, we had some success. In 5.5 years, we baptized 5,000 people. That was after we had already established works in 13 islands of the Caribbean, and they were all successful. Then I decided, because a Venezuelan came over and was crying while I was preaching and told me that we need somebody like you and others to come and work in Venezuela. We moved over there, and this is one of the many, many congregations in Venezuela. Barinas, the city that's right in the dead center of the country. And it was, as a matter of fact, it was where Chavez, who was the Marxist leader that upset the whole barrel and ruined the economy in Venezuela. But we had a lot of conversions there when in the heyday before people began to leave Venezuela because they couldn't afford to stay there. We had about 600 people every Sunday morning in Barinas. These are some of the preachers that right now are still preaching to that congregation I just showed you. I'll tell you what, these are wonderful guys. I mean, just unbelievable servants of God. And they're doing a great job in the city of Barinas. But all across the country, there are people like that. They go to the river every Sunday after they've had services and baptized people, and they've got baptistry pools, but they choose to go to the river instead. And then this man came up to me when I was at a preacher's retreat and said, Brother Brown, do you remember? And Salazar was his last name, Gustavo Salazar. I said, no, I don't. And then he sent me a picture of his family, and he had an 11-year-old boy. And I said, oh, yeah, I know who he is now because I baptized him when he was 11 years old, and this was his 11-year-old boy that I recognized in the picture. But you talk about peace and joy. Look at the joy in the face of this gentleman who's been baptized. This year, as of now, the year's not over. There have been over 120 baptisms in the little town where our house is, down in Venezuela, San Antonio de los Altos, San Antonio Heights, translated. And more and more and more people are becoming Christians. And all of the preachers that work for this congregation got COVID and nearly died, but pulled through after we prayed a lot for them. This is one of those guys. And he is going to be living in my house. My wife doesn't know that yet. But he's going to be living in our house at Venezuela probably before next month is over. But Carlos is a wonderful Christian man, has a lovely wife, two beautiful children. And you can see the joy in the face of this lady. And this is under very difficult circumstances. Did you know that these bills that you see stacked together there are 500 believer bills? In other words, we have dollars that have believers, and each one is 500 believers. And it takes that many to buy that number of tomatoes. You say, well, what does that cause? It causes disaster. It causes hunger. I had a church that asked me for a report on the work of Venezuela, and I sent this to them, and I put that in there, and I just got a $2,000 check from the church in Cookville, Tennessee, because they saw the situation and said, oh my goodness, well, we need to send something for benevolence, and they specified on the check, benevolence, and so we're trying to help them. Over 6 million Venezuelans have left Venezuela. Included in this number are many members of the church and preachers that have had to leave. Just don't have any money to live on, no source of income. And so they leave. Where have they gone? Well, they've gone out into Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Spain. And when Juan went over to Russia, he found some of them in Moscow. And I think they're just about in every country of the world, but also here in the United States, we've got Venezuelan preachers that are now in California, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kansas, Florida, Texas, New York, New Jersey, and who knows where else. And they're all, and this is what really amazed me. The former vice president of York Christian College called me and said, Bob, do you realize that all these Venezuelans are not just becoming members of the churches where they've gone, they're becoming leaders. When I went out to California not too long ago, Carlos Abello was the one who received me there. And he's a Venezuelan, and he's an elder of the church. I've had more and more Venezuelans are becoming elders of churches here in the States. The same is true with the ones that you saw here, the Sosa brothers, and also Cedeno. We have people speaking from this book right here in this room who are Venezuelans who have become leaders of the church in the United States of America among the Latin Americans. This is just a sample. This is a church down in Peru, and we've worked with the Harding University students, go down there and do campaigns. And these are all Venezuelans that are living in Lima, Peru, and are in many cases, a lot of them now leaders in the church there. We trained them well, we had a great work, and when they had to leave Venezuela, where they've gone, they've been a blessing. This is one of the places that we reached out to. It's called Cozumel. It's a beautiful place, right? Yeah, look over there saying, yeah, yeah. Marshall saying, yeah. Marshall helped build this building. I bought an old beat up house that about falling over. Floors all cracked up. It just was a pitiful sight. And Marshall joined with the Waldron family and others, and they went in there and built this beautiful building. And we've had some people that we know that have gone by there to see it. You might recognize some of them, right? And that's the congregation now that worships there. God has blessed us in so many ways. But here in Denver, we haven't been deprived either. Grant got baptized. Danny worked with him dish, and so we taught him, and he got baptized. And then Mom and Dad started coming, and so he's been Teresa with us today. Thank the Lord. And just what a wonderful blessing all of them have been to the kingdom. And then Shalimar got baptized. Oh, see some bashfulness come out on him. But that was in Juwan's hot tub. But every now and then we didn't have access to the hot tub. So Emily, whose parents are members of the church, and they worship at the Littleton Church of Christ, but they wanted Kelly to teach their daughter Emily. Emily's brother brother's a medical student and already baptized, and she's going to study medicine. David, it might interest you, but good people, good people. And I had the privilege of baptizing at Bear Valley. And just this past week, a guy came with Gino, who some of you know, and Dominic, his son, and they wanted to have a young man baptized who is from India. His family's living here now. They're Hindus. The mama definitely did not want her son to become a Christian. He has a girlfriend at the school where he studies here. He's in high school. And she did not want him to be baptized. And she called all the way from right here where we are down to the Bear Valley Church. She was calling and trying to talk him out of being baptized, but it didn't work. And so I got to baptize him in the scalding hot water they had over at Bear Valley. That was a shocker. But we managed to get it done. And Dominic is in the baptistry with me also because he wanted to be there with his friend when he was baptized, and he participated. And he actually did the immersing of I have a niece who is, that's his first name, this young man, who is very, very persuaded that Jesus is the Son of God and willing to become a Christian. It's happening here too, not just overseas, but it needs to happen more here. Do you agree? I mean, I'm thankful for everyone that become a member of the church here in Highland Ranch. But by now, we ought to have multiple congregations in Highland Ranch, not just one. And this room ought to be full of people to the extent that we can have everybody together at one time here. And that's possible. But it's going to be a matter of us remembering the peace and joy that Jesus came to give us. He was nailed on that cross, looking down and forgiving his enemies. He was thinking about the fact that, you know, I've done it. That's what he said. He said, it's done. It's completed. It's finalized. But that was only the beginning for us. It was the end for him. He done what he had to do. Now we have to do what we have to do. And Ephesians 4:16 says that each one must do his part. Can you imagine if each one of us would bring one visitor next week or sometime this month, one visitor each, and we'll continue to work with it? Why? It would be an experience just like we've seen in the Caribbean, just like we've seen in all of Latin America, Kazakhstan, and other places. God will bless us, but we have to do our part. We have to be willing to let the joy, the peace, and the power, the joy God grants us through Jesus, the peace he gave us in sending his son, and the power that we experience through reading the word of God given to us by the Holy Spirit. And so we need to do it, right? All right. You agree? Right. So we need to be reaching out to other people, not coming to church to see what I can get out of it, what they can do for me, but rather what I can do to bring somebody else to Jesus so they can know peace and joy and happiness. God bless you. Thanks for letting me do as I always do, be abusive and preach too long.